The exhibition at the Thyssen Museum is called At-Tāriq, and it's the first chapter of a long exploration and a project that will take several years. At-Tariq means the nightcomer, the guest who comes at night asking for knowledge. And in the Quran, there is a verse about hospitality, being able to open your door to the Tariq at any moment of the day. So it's a very important notion in defining what hospitality is in Muslim and Arab culture. And in Arab culture, hospitality is essential for me as well. So At-Tariq, the nightcomer, is how I'm moving throughout the Arab world, starting with the Atlas and Morocco and the Atlas area, exploring traditional Arabic music and musics from the rural Arab world. But also At-Tariq is for me a very beautiful word and an important one because it refers to the morning star, the star that we see at sunrise and that nomads and travelers used to guide themselves to start the journey throughout the desert. And the roads I'm following, they are the roads of the nomads, the Tuaregs, of the Amazigh, and of populations who are still carrying these rural traditions and who are also historically behind the migration of instruments, of rhythms, and a lot of things that these music carry.
Working with Tarek and the sort of region that he is interested in his project is a way of remembering and re-inhabiting a tradition that is a European tradition that has existed over centuries, that has influenced and greatly impacted more than we acknowledge today, the culture that we now call our European Christian culture. And that to honor and remember, reconnect to that heritage and that knowledge landscape and knowledge environment through which so much else was possible is, I think, one of the sort of beautiful moments that At-Tariq offers us.
What pushed me to start this journey was actually a project called Revisiting Tarab, which is an exploration of classical Arabic music I started in 2010. And when exploring Al-Nahda music, I discovered the importance of rural traditions and their weight and influence on classical Arabic music. And so this is how things happened. Like in end of 2021, I visited the city of Ouarzazate without knowing anybody there, without any arrangement, and started to ask around. And from meeting some of the musicians whose recordings I had, I started to see what they did in their daily life. Some were instrument makers with whom I made the drums that are inside this piece now. Some were pottery makers, others were like bead and jewelry makers. So there's a whole array of crafts or the whole ecosystem that I started to discover also that inspired the space and the composition and the piece of At-Tariq at TBA and the Thyssen. The sound piece is about an hour and a half. That is one of my most composed and best composed pieces. I'm so proud of this work in that sense. We started with the Amazigh, Moroccan footage, but around this I invited a whole array of international musicians from different realms and different fields, some from electronic music, some from jazz, to revisit this music with me and to make a composition that is very rich, you see, and that takes these as starting points, the traditional musics, but takes them totally elsewhere, because in the case of these rural musics, we are often dealing with an oral heritage. And in the case of this composition and this sound piece, there was a challenge of how do we take something oral and turn it into a fixed format. And actually what I like is that this orality is allowing a universality, you see, and something that is transformative in the way the piece is composed, in the way the voices and like all these different aesthetics come together. So now the sound is inside pottery vases, inside seats that are inspired by something that is also very important and central to this project, which is Al-Majlis, which is the traditional Arabic salon, as this collective space of congregation where music used to happen, poetry, weddings, celebrations of different sorts. So this was also like a starting point for how to deploy this composition and these sounds into one space.
Tarek Atoui has developed over the last decade and a half a very interesting practice of combining different forms of sensing the world through the integration of acoustic and musical forms within kind of sculptural landscapes that constantly evolve, that are dynamic, that change, that move, that bring the sound into circulation, is a form of making us actually be in a space that is opening up different ways of listening, and listening not only through the ears, but listening through our entire body and our entire sort of the most open forms of mindedness.
All the objects that are on this project are done for this project. And some of the objects that I was really amazed and impressed with were the pottery like that are in that show. You see, they were made outside of a town called Zagora, close to the Algerian border, in a landscape that is very dry and very hot. And so these potteries were made totally naturally by a pottery maker who has no electricity, who like has to go 14 kilometers to get the water and like make this out of the soil of his surroundings. And they came out like white, very dry, very rough, but with something very special to them, a sound and an acoustic that is unique. I've worked a lot on ceramics and pottery and clay before, but what came out from this region talks a lot about the region.
One of the consequences of this practice that I find very important is that he kind of reminds us that the things that are around us, the objects, the materials, the natural elements, they're not dead objects. They're not things that we can discard of, but we are in a convivial space with them. They have their own memories. They have their own history to tell. And he makes them speak, he makes them speak for us. He makes them pay attention to the fact that the world is not just a world for human, but it's a world we share. We share, with other cultures, with other sensibilities, with other ways of knowing. And through that, he offers us, I think, the possibility of really honing this art of listening and exposing ourselves without, any preconditions.